Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the Bleav Network, and joining me to preview the Texans-Colts game is an old friend of the show and a Bleav colleague, Colts insider Lawrence Owen, host of the Bleav and Colts podcast. It's always great to catch up with you, Lawrence, and what a way to start the season, especially after that pseudo playoff game a few months ago.
It left different tastes in both fans' mouths, that last game that they played, right? I mean, it was a nail biter right up until the end. I mean, no fan, no team knew who was going to win until that last play, actually, finally, when the ball hit the ground and everybody, made their reactions to it. And I think that once the schedule came out and saw that both these teams were getting ready to clash week one, I think both fan bases were excited to see what happens and where we go from here.
One name I'm sure starts the conversation for you guys. How do you and the Colts fans feel about Anthony Richardson after camp and the preseason?
I went to camp. I watched him in camp. And in camp, he had those up and down days, which is what you would expect from a guy who had very few starts in college and very few starts in, as a starter in the NFL, almost a whole year of not playing any kind of football due to a shoulder injury. And honestly, he looks good for the most part. You still see the occasional errant throw where it's not placed where it should be, out in front of a guy so you get yak yards or something of that nature. But when he's in the pocket, standing still, it seems like he does a very good job with his accuracy. His footwork is great. It's when he's moving around and throwing on the run, it seems like that's when those accuracy issues kind of kick in a little bit. But really the worry from the surgery was, did it affect his throwing motion? Did it affect his throwing power? How far he can get the ball downfield in a hurry? And it seems like none of that has changed, right? So at this point, it's more about, how is Steichen going to use him? Is he going to continue to use him the way he was used last year, in the RPO full, option where, if he feels like he needs to tuck it and run, he can tuck it and run. And is there going to be designed run plays for him, especially with the injury history that he had last year?
I assume they didn't try to run him much in camp or the preseason just to keep him upright for the start of the season.
Well, you got to also remember quarterbacks wear those red jerseys, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, if they're going to run him in the RPO or quarterback design runs, they don't have no problem of anyone touching him, obviously. But that's, again, preseason, you didn't see, even in the RPO system in the preseason games, he didn't tuck it and run with that ball, in the option part. To extend plays, he did that. But in the option part, he always chose to sit in the pocket and throw the football, which makes me believe that either Steichen is going to kind of pull back a little bit on those reins, or B, they just wasn't wanting other teams to see where he was at in that development or not. So I hope that they continue to do what they do last year, but to make sure that Richardson knows, hey, you need to live to play another down. So a big dude gets near you, make sure you get down before they make that big contact or get out of bounds.
Yeah, the Texans are not going to allow him to wear a red jersey for this game, I don't think. But I do want to get your take on the Colts offseason. First of all, how do you feel about what they did or did not do in free agency?
Honestly, I am one of the few people that actually thought that re-signing all the good players to long-term, extensions was a smart idea. In today's NFL, you have so much roster turnover. And if you got good players, you want to keep those good players so that you could build on them and gain that consistency, that camaraderie over years. I think that is a fantastic idea. You just got to make sure that those players that you are extending are staples in your organization, right? You don't want to extend a guy that may or may not, be playing up to par this year, next year, year after. So I think they did a good job doing that. Now, there is one position that I'd say 95% of Colts fans was a little upset that they didn't dive into a little bit. And it's not as if there wasn't players there, and that is the safety, especially the free safety. We have our starting at strong safety with Julian Blackmon, but the free safety was where we got burnt a lot last year, especially against the Texans, throwing it down the middle over deep, that free safety position. They seem to bite way too much on the underneath routes or on draw plays and things of that nature where they get burnt over the top. And you got Diggs and a few other guys sitting out there on the free agency market that the Colts could have went and got and never did. And that kind of sat in the craw of a few Colts fans. But outside of that, I feel like they spent their money wisely, knowing what they were putting their money into rather than just rolling dice on guys that played well on other teams, but may or may not play well on yours.
Yeah, I just find it curious because the Texans fans were a little bit concerned about the safety position too. And there were guys out there that took a long time to get signed. It's just kind of weird how that position is so devalued. It's, even sometimes I feel like it's worse than running back right now. And the running backs would just be upset if I said it, but I think it's kind of true. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so too as well. I mean, if you go look and see what some of these guys, signed finally, right? The two big names, they didn't sign for much at all. I think one signed for a little over $3 million and another one signed for like $5 million. And these are, veterans that have been Pro Bowlers, all pro, been around the league, would have been a great addition to any secondary that needed a veteran presence, even whether they were a starter or not.
What did you think of the Colts draft? Maybe you can start on the draft with UT Longhorn product and wide receiver Adonai Mitchell, who was actually born here in the Houston area. I don't know if people know that. I think with the high school in Nashville, but Houston area guy. It sounds like he made an early good impression, though.
Absolutely. Both the early picks for the Indianapolis Colts have made in very big impressions during training camp and practices. Adonai, A.D. Mitchell, his route running still needs a little bit of work, but his release off the line at the snap is unreal. It is so good that veteran wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. was talking about earlier this offseason about how he would pick his brain on how he was getting off the line so well, even under press coverage and things of that nature. So he's someone who definitely is not short of any type of confidence, right? He tells the quarterbacks, no matter who's throwing him the football, whether it's the first, second, or third stringer throwing him the ball, hey, just throw it my direction. I'll come down with it. I will go and I will get the ball. And for the most part, he has lived up to his word. So we'll see where he ends up. I'm not sure right now if he makes the starting lineup week one against the Texans. I still feel like Alec Pierce has that spot as the number 2 outside wide receiver, but Adonai will definitely get plenty of snaps.
What positions are you worried about with the Colts going into this season? You mentioned safety. Is there any other position?
Really, the secondary is a big concern. I'm pretty happy about all the other positions, like quarterback a little bit. I mean, Anthony Richardson still is, as much as I like him, as much as the upside he has, there's still quite a bit of unknown about him and whether or not he's going to fill those roles that he needs to fill and whether or not he can stay healthy. But cornerback is definitely still young guys back there outside, obviously, of our nickel corner, Kenny Moore II, who is easily a top 3 nickel corner in the league. The other guys, we got 3 young players. 2 were rookies last year and a second-year player that ended up getting injured and out for the season in like week 3, who was our best corner last year. 3 or 4, something like that, is when he went out. And now we're just hoping that 2 of those 3 guys takes a step, right? Because last year our pass defense, when we didn't get pressure on the quarterback, was not the best in the world. Pass rush and pass coverage needs to work hand in hand, as anyone who understands football knows. If the pass rush can't get there, the secondary has got to be able to hold on just a second or 2 longer so that the pass rush can, and then vice versa. So, if the pass rush can get there early, that's going to help the secondary quite a bit, but you can't rely on one more than the other. And a lot of people feel the person that needs to make the biggest jump is Jalen Jones, who was a 7th round pick last season, beat out our 3rd round pick from last year. As a matter of fact, so bad that the 3rd round pick got released at the 53-man cut last year. I believe that Jalen is that guy that needs to step up the biggest right now. Dallas Flowers is another guy. If he can't do it, Dallas Flowers will definitely have to step in. He's our speedster at corner, the guy that can run toe-to-toe with those 4-3 wide receivers out there in the league.
We're going to get to the matchups in just a second, but just a quick reminder to our audience to share your thoughts in the YouTube comments. We want to hear from you. Click the like button to support the show as well. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. All right, Lawrence, let's move to the Texans-Colts matchups. And is there an area or two the Colts you feel like can take advantage of? The only thing I can think of from a defensive side with the Colts and the Texans on offense is the youth at guard and center with Kenyon Green and Juice Scruggs. That's maybe an area that you might be able to exploit.
Yeah, that's the big key area. I think it's going to be the big key area for the Indianapolis Colts all year long is they got to win the matchups up front along the line, especially on defense, right? The Colts have got a very, very good defensive line, not to mentioning, the addition of Leatu Latu, who's had an outstanding preseason so far in training camp. But those other guys, now we did lose Samson Ebukam for the season, but he had, I think, 9.5 sacks last year. But there was 5 or 6 other guys on this defensive line that had 8 or more sacks, right? And they're still on the team. So with the addition of Leatu Latu and DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, Kwity Paye, Dio Dangbo, and multiple other people, they need to be able to get in and create havoc in the backfield, whether it's stopping the run or getting after a certain CJ Stroud in order for this team, for the Indianapolis Colts, to have any kind of hope of winning this game.
What scares you most about the Texans on either side of the ball, really?
Oh, either side of the ball is definitely the wide receiving group. I mean, come on. Look, I love CJ Stroud. He's a great quarterback. I think he proved a lot of people wrong, as a matter of fact, because a lot of people were thinking, a little something else, because he is an Ohio State product at quarterback, and they haven't had the best of luck when it comes to bringing their quarterbacks in the NFL. He came out, hit the ground running, playing incredibly well, but it's going to be up to those wide receivers. I think they're going to have to play up to their potential, and Texans have got great wide receivers across the board. And they even added guys, right? So this is a situation where I just talked about how the Colts secondary worries me. This is the game that's going to find out whether or not they can step up and take that next step. Because if they don't, then it's just going to be a barn burner on the Texans' end.
Who was the guy? I'm trying to remember, the Colts defensive back that had the ball go through his hands on the last game a couple of years ago that basically set up the Texans with Stroud. Do you remember who that was?
Yeah. It was Rodney Thomas II. He is currently the backup at free safety right now. So he's not the starter. To my knowledge, he's not the starter. He's had a few problems like that where he should have caught an interception and just for some reason didn't, or would bite on an underneath route and then get chopped right over the top. Yeah, that's Rodney Thomas II is that guy. As a matter of fact, he was I had Rodney McLeod on as my co-host that season, and he just when I asked about that, he said, I was there. He was right in front of me. I thought for sure he had that interception, and it just whoop, and I was like, oh no. And then the guy caught the ball right in front of Rodney McLeod, and he's like, oh.
I feel like should be a Texans fan at one of these Colts games that should have a sign that says "Thank you, Rodney Thomas," and the Texans fans will get that. The diehards will definitely get that one. Recently the Colts and especially Jonathan Taylor has killed the Texans, but their improvement late last year and the addition of Azeez Al-Shaair on the defensive side to stop the run could make a huge difference this time. How do you feel about what you guys can do against the Texans and the run game?
Well, in the run game, it really depends, honestly, on how much respect the Texans are going to give in the RPO, right? That's the big thing, because last year you guys never got a chance to face Anthony Richardson RPOing with Jonathan Taylor. And that is a huge difference between him and Gardner Minshew, right? Or him and our backup from last year, right? That was in there during the earlier game.
Yeah, to remind everybody, Taylor was out. It was kind of, was it like a semi-contract situation? And then
he was still injured. His ankle was still bad. He was still on the PUP list until.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So yeah, he didn't play that first game when Richardson was killing the Texans on the ground in the first quarter, I remember, and then the injury. And I'm just kind of curious. You noticed, I'm sure, that the Texans got a lot of buzz over the offseason. How do you see the expectations that they've had? Do you think they're overrated, underrated, or where should they be?
There's been multiple times, and I'm not doing this I'm not saying this just because I'm a Colts fan talking about the Texans. All right, this is just general facts. In the AFC South, it is a weird situation where a team will win the division, look good one year, expect to go big, and then the very next year they fall off. The Jaguars have done it. The Titans have done it. The Colts have done it. The Texans have done it. This is the year where the Texans, if they're going to do something, they need to do it and prove the staple wrong this year, right? And I think that's why they went all in when it came to certain things this season, especially during the offseason, to go and getting some guys. I think they're trying to say, hey, this isn't going to happen to us this year, right? It may have happened to Jacksonville the year before and the Titans the year before that and things of that nature, but they're wanting to put a stop on that. I personally feel like they're a 10-win team, 10, maybe 11 in that general vicinity. They're definitely a playoff team. People saying that they're a team that could, challenge Kansas City for the Super Bowl. Depends upon how good they're playing at the end of the year. That's the way I see it, because there's a lot of games between week 1 and the playoffs, and you got to be playing your best football, which is, what the Texans was doing at that point in time, playing very, very good football. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So you would smash the over on the Texans. Cause last I saw it was maybe 9.5 for the win total. So you're saying 10 or 11, which is very similar team to last year. And then the spread for this one's 2.5 with Texans favored last night. And this is all whenever you guys listen, but right now, as you and I are talking, it's 2. Is that fair? Do you think 2.5?
It is fair, especially when you look at the fact that the Indianapolis Colts haven't won a home game in like 10 years, or the week 1 game, not a home game, a week 1 game. They haven't won in like 10 years. That's a big monkey they got to get off their back. Last year, they got rid of the other big monkey that they had on their back where they hadn't won in Jacksonville in like 14 years or something like that. It was ridiculous. All right. So this is that year where you look at that and you might say, well, that has no bearing on anything, but it does. It kind of does. Streaks kind of stick in the mind of players and coaches, even though they try to act like it don't. I've been a player. I know streaks are there. Every player knows what that record is right now for them, and whether they like to admit it or not, it's going to play against them. Now, again, the Texans also have a very high-powered offense. The Colts secondary, as I stated earlier, is questionable at best. So I understand why the 2.5. I'm surprised it's not a little bit higher than that. I would go as far as to say it should be 3 or 4, personally.
Right. I feel like it's fair. I think it's gone up actually as the last few days have gone on. And then with the Colts in the big picture, like how many wins do you think they get this season? How do you see it playing out?
I could see them 9 or 10. I think it's the Texans and the Colts this year in the AFC South. Now, it really all depends. It's going to focus mostly around Anthony Richardson and whether he could stay healthy. I think he's got enough talent to win ball games and be a problem for defensive coordinators and defenses in general. He's just got to be able to stay on the field. So I think that's the biggest key right now for the Indianapolis Colts. Even though I have faith in our backup and Joe Flacco, what he did when he came off the couch to play for Cleveland last year was unprecedented. But I still, the ceiling with Anthony Richardson is way higher than it is with Statue Joe.
A question, I didn't even ask you this, but that's a good point. Flacco is taking over for Minshew. Do you think that's an upgrade, a downgrade, or they're about the same?
I think it's an upgrade overall. Flacco, even though he is a pocket quarterback and he's not as maneuverable as Minshew was. Flacco can read the field better and is not afraid to take shots downfield and open up the field a little bit, where when Minshew was in the game, for the most part, everybody knew the ball was going to be inside 20 yards. There was a few times he threw it deep last year, but very, very rarely, where Flacco has no problem at all chucking it 40, 50 yards down the field when he needs to, if he sees an opportunity. Granted, Minshew's a guy who, going in, he could play a whole season if he needed to. I don't think Flacco's that guy. If Richardson goes down week 4, week 5, like he did last season, Flacco might turn on the guns for, 4, 5, 6 weeks, but then he's going to fall off. I mean, you can't be 40 years old, and be expected to be able to play a full season at a high level, right? I mean, that's unrealistic expectations, in my opinion. Very few people can do that. There's only so many Tom Brady's out there, right? But yeah, I think it's pretty even considering, what each quarterback brought to the table.
Yeah, we talked about, Texans have had difficulty at times stopping the Colts run game, and it's just going to be interesting because there's no Christian Harris. The first few games of this season, the Texans are not deep at linebacker. Al Shire is better than anybody as a run defender. You saw him, I'm sure, a ton with the Titans, so you know how good he can be, but it's the guy opposite him that I worry a little bit about. So if they have a big day, I'm worried about, I assume it's Henry To'oTo'o is going to be the linebacker opposite him. And so maybe that's somebody that Richardson or, Taylor, either one of those guys could take advantage of. And that's really, from a strategy point, I think that's the one point where maybe you guys can get sort of an advantage, but it's not going to be what it was early last season where, it just seemed like guys didn't know where they were supposed to be. It was early in the D'Amico era, and it's going to be a little bit different than that. But if there is something that can go wrong, and boy, they cannot afford an injury to Azeez as long as Christian Harris is out, because like I said, the depth is just real bad there.
The best way of beating a high-flying aerial attack is through a ground game, an effective ground game. The Colts have built an offensive line and signed Jonathan Taylor for specifically that, right? So we'll see what happens. Obviously, if the Texans are able to stuff a run here and there and force some third and longs, then, possibly they might be able to get off the field and get the ball to CJ. But if they're allowing 3.5, 4.5 or more yards a clip on the ground, it could be a very long day, and CJ might not see the ball as much as what he'd like to. So it's going to have a lot to do with that interior on both lines on whether or not they're going to be able to hold their own or not.
Super anxious to see what happens. Before we go, what do our listeners need to know about Bleav in Colts Pod, and how can they find you on the socials?
Oh, Bleav in Colts is found anywhere that you listen to your audio podcast. You can wherever it is that you listen to it. And then obviously, if you want to watch the videos with myself and Donald Thomas, who was a former starting right guard for the Indianapolis Colts back in the Andrew Luck days, we are on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, Lawrence Owen, and on the Bleav channel as well.
Always good to catch up with you, man. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.